So welcome to Replenish. Hope that sustains in the midst of adversity. This is a safe place where I'll invite special guests to share encouragement and insight to replenish us in the journey of raising kids from hard places. So whether you're a foster parent, adoptive parent, kinship, this conversation is for you. And so before I introduce our guest today, I am going to read their bio. So today I've invited Amanda Purvis, and her husband David is going to join us for a conversation about connecting during crisis and how it works with being married, how you can tag team and just help each other out. So Amanda is a training specialist with the Karen Purvis Institute of Child Development at Texas Christian University. And as a training specialist, Amanda's main focus is instructing professionals working with children who have experienced trauma. And she does that through trust-based relational intervention, TBRI, for those of you who aren't familiar with that. And it's a holistic, attachment-based, and trauma-informed intervention designed to meet the complex needs of vulnerable children, offering practical tools for caregivers to give those in their care, their kiddos, be able to reach their highest potential. Amanda earned her bachelor's degree in social work from Metropolitan State University in Denver, Colorado. She began her career working with Child Protective Services as an intake worker. Then she transitioned to foster care and post-adoption support, where she spent a decade of her career before beginning her work with the Purvis Institute in 2017. And now she currently lives in Castle Rock, Colorado with her husband, David, and their 5 children and their dog, Nav. And thanks to this whole coronavirus thing, we also get to hear from her husband, and they're going to just discuss what it's like being quarantined and parenting and give us their expertise. So I just wanted to welcome you and just first ask you, what started you on this journey to working with kids in hard places?
Yeah, I became a social worker and was doing my internship actually initially in Denver, and worked with kids who were in the hospital as a result of child abuse. So those were my cases. And through that experience, we were personally on the journey to an international adoption at the time. And I would come home every day kind of stressed out, and he would ask me, what's your favorite part of your job? And I said, I love working with the foster parents. I'm really, that was my favorite part. I loved all the foster parents that I got to meet and work with and just what they were doing. And so he actually said, why aren't we foster parents? And I had honestly never thought of that. So from that point, I quit my job fairly quickly after that, and we became foster parents. And so for a period of time, we fostered, we had, I think it's 17 different kiddos come and go.
Not all at once, not all at once.
Right. From the ages of 0 to 17. So we kind of ran the gamut, and then 3 of them ended up staying forever. And so after our last adoption, we closed our home to foster care, and I went back to work in the system doing training and stuff for foster and adoptive parents in the state of Colorado. And then from there, I became a TBRI practitioner before any of that. And so then I was training TBRI in the state of Colorado. And then from that, the Institute actually reached out to me and offered me a job. So that was 3 years ago now. And my husband, how did you get into this?
I married you.
Me too.
On one of our first dates, you should tell him.
Yeah, she made it very clear. There was this disclaimer when we started dating. We met doing missions work a long time ago, short-term missions work. And she made it very clear. The disclaimer was that since she was a little girl, she always knew that she was supposed to adopt kids. So that was definitely there. As a young man, I'm sure there's guys that are more spiritual than me, but I, being a young man, had never even thought about it. So it took time, and we had a long distance dating relationship across the country for 2.5 years before we got engaged, and moved to the same town and got married. So I had plenty of time to think about it, and then decided that sounds good to me.
So we had one biological child and then went the foster route from there. And then, so we added 3 kids to our home. And then we also accidentally got pregnant. So we went from one.
After adding the children, we got
pregnant. Yeah. So we went from 1 to 5 in 18 months. So that was, when our youngest was born, our oldest was 5. So we had 5 and under. So I refer to those days as our dark days.
Dark ages.
But
we had 5 in diapers.
Yeah, we really did.
5 different sizes of diapers.
Yeah.
Oh,
like, how we talk about, and, Saddleback does an awesome job of, encouraging us to create a community around us, like to, tell them what you need and have support from your community. And whenever anyone would say like, hey, we know that you guys need diapers, what size? We'd say all of them. Any size you bring us, we will use. So that was us. And so then I started my work at the Institute, and that honestly was a dream come true. The first time I heard Karen speak, I looked at my husband and I said, this is what I want to do forever. And he was like, what? Like, follow her around, or like what do you
be her groupie?
Yeah, yes, all of those things. So it was just a dream come true for me to begin working at the Institute. And I think my professional and personal journeys kind of collided. And that was just a really beautiful thing for me. So yeah, that's a long answer to your short question.
I like it. Long answers are good. Great. So today we wanted to just talk about, we talked a little bit through email about how TBRI works and how you've worked it out like through your marriage. Not necessarily like doing TBRI on your husband, although I'm sure that comes into play too.
Does
But,
that? Yes.
Just like how you guys have worked together as a team, because it can be really rough, and sometimes you're on the same page and sometimes not on the same page. So maybe we could start with Amanda. You were saying, you became a practitioner, and then this is kind of your journey. And David, you kind of married her and were into it and on board. But maybe you could talk about, was there ever a time where there was like, Amanda, you fully understand the trust-based relational intervention, and was there ever a time where maybe it was difficult because you felt like David wasn't on the same page, and the conflict that comes from that added to the conflict of what's going on? And
well, I'll start off by saying, first of all, we're going to talk about our marriage, but I think that really this applies to anyone who's parenting. Hopefully, even if you're a single parent, you have a community around you who's going to help and support you. And we'll talk more specifically about that in a little bit. But the answer to your question, quite frankly, is yes, every day for both of us. I mean, just understanding TBRI and knowing it, I think we both have a good understanding. Obviously, it's my job to have a really great understanding of it, but we are all messing up every day. I mean, let's just put that out there. So there are times when I'll have a response that's so not TBRI, and he will, be able to step in and do the right thing in that moment. And that's kind of why I told you guys that we kind of want to talk about that idea of like passing the buck and what does that look like when co-parenting, because when I was telling him, I got asked to do this call about parenting and quarantine, and like, what do you think I should talk about? And then of course, we had an incident, like I was like, oh, this is what we should talk about.
Write that down.
Is, what does it look like when our buttons are getting pushed as parents, which happens all the time. But now that we're parenting in quarantine and trying to suddenly homeschool all of our kids with trauma and, you know, all of the additional stress that all of us are dealing with now, let alone if you have someone in your family who's sick or immunocompromised or all of those things, like we're all under enormous levels of stress. And so this idea of kind of passing the buck and what does that look like, to me seems like a really applicable thing that we could talk about today. And what I want to say is, for us, it's most often, you know, me to him or him to me in our marriage. But whether you're, you know, living with a parent or, you know, someone else that you're co-parenting with, that applies. And then even if you are a single parent, my hope is that through this discussion, if you don't already have people on your side that you can pass the buck to, that this would encourage you to do so. In our lives, my husband David's a pilot. And so there are times, you know, when he's gone, he's really gone.
Yeah.
And so there have been times in our journey where I have had to pass the buck and he hasn't been home. But in order to keep my children safe, I needed to, you know, call someone. Honestly. So we have those people in our lives too, for when either of us are kind of single parenting. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about that today. So I'll just jump in and then just feel free to interrupt whenever you want, Tristan, and you too.
Okay.
I'm going to ask people to just type in their questions too in the chat room if they have them.
Perfect. And I am keeping an eye on that. And my tattoo means Eshet Chayil, which is woman of valor from Proverbs. Okay, so that was one of the questions.
I saw.
Okay.
I wasn't sure. Should I ask that off topic? What? I don't know. Was it before a long time ago? But
so all that to say, I think most often when we're passing the buck, it's because one of our buttons have gotten pushed. And what I like to say about buttons is, first of all, we all have our buttons. If you don't know what your buttons are, ask
somebody that you trust.
Yeah.
Because they know.
Yeah. Ask your kids, ask your spouse, ask your friends, because they definitely know what your buttons are. But a couple things about buttons is, the first one is buttons equal power. So when I feel powerless in a relationship, I'm going to push that person's buttons so that then they lose control and then I'm in control of the situation. So for our kids, most of them came from really chaotic environments. And so when we lose control as caregivers, that actually can feel more comforting to them because that's what they know than when we're in control. And so ultimately that actually becomes a safe place for them where they know how to respond and they're in control. So yes, your kids push your buttons more than maybe your friends' kids push their buttons. So that's why it's important for us to talk about this, because as caregivers who are wanting to bring healing and hope to our kids, we have to really work on this. So we all have them, they equal power. And I would just add, specifically for the time that we're in right now, of course our kids are feeling powerless, even if we're doing everything right with, you know, school being taken from them, with their friends, with their routine, you know, all of those things that our kids crave and need more has been removed. And so that's going to be a common theme for all of us on this call. And then the other thing about buttons is they're windows into our past most often. And so I would encourage you to chase the why. Why is this a button for me? So for me, for example, one of my buttons is when my daughter rolls her eyes at me. And for whatever reason, that to me just sends me over the top. And it's not when the boys roll their eyes at me, it's when she does. And so I realized that's more about me than it is her, right? Because all of girls for all of history have rolled their eyes at their mom. So when she does that and I want to respond huge and not at an appropriate TBRI language, right? Like a level 1 playful engagement. I want to instead like restrain her, you know, like, and that's inappropriate. So So I have to know if I'm over responding to a behavior, that has more to do with me than it does my child or their behavior. And so that would be a time when we would ask ourselves as caregivers, what does this say about me? You know, how can I, you know, what do I do about this in this moment? So in our current time, what I would suggest is if you have the ability to pass the buck in that moment so that you then have some time to process that, then that's ideal. So for example, we had an incident the other day where, you know, the kids are running around and chasing each other and pillow fighting and being super loud. And, you know, I'm on a call, he's on a call. And so he, you know, goes to calm them down and they were just super disrespectful. And so he texted.
Well, it was after, you know, they had already been level 1, level 2, level 37.
We'd worked our way up the ladder.
So we were in double digits for sure. I know that doesn't exist. And so I was done because not only had they not listened, now they had taken it to such a level that I was pretty sure the neighbors were going to inquire as to if we needed any help. So that's where we were at whenever I think I texted you.
Yeah.
Because she was on the call. I texted her from the other room and said, I'm done.
Yeah.
So now, and you know, in everybody's new normal for now with the quarantine, now what we did is she finished her call, I finished mine. I was not emotionally healthy enough to close the loop on what needed to happen with the kids. So I let it sit and told the kids that mom would talk to them when she was done. And ideally,
you went on the front porch.
Yes, to have some time. I put myself in timeout. I know ideally we don't like to put kids in timeout, but if either of us are not in a healthy or practical space to take care of it, that's, you know, you have to hit the pause button. It's not stop, and that's a temptation, I think, when people are emotionally exhausted, which I think is happening a lot right now. I would just say we have to hit the pause button because she's going to talk about that, closing the loop on behavior, on corrective behavior, but we can't hit stop because then that circle never gets completed.
Yeah.
What do you mean by hitting stop? I'm not following what you're saying.
I'm saying if I'm emotionally exhausted and let's say Amanda and I are having a really rough day with each other, my tendency would be, you know, we all have different personality types, different numbers, but my tendency would be if I'm emotionally, mentally, spiritually wiped out to hit stop, meaning I don't hit play again. Instead, what I'm saying is in this case, we hit the pause button, meaning when mom's done with work in 15, 20 minutes, then she'll come talk to you because dad will not be emotionally ready in 15 or 20 minutes. He'll see you in an hour.
And then we close the loop. So then he presses play after, you know, when he's ready.
Yeah.
So what happened was, you know, he stayed on the front porch. Then I went and talked to the kids. They went out, you know, and played and they were off doing their thing. And then I went out with him, you know, and then when he was ready, he went and talked to them. So this idea of kind of passing off the buck, in that instance, he said, here's the baton, Amanda, you're in charge, right? Like, I don't want to lose it. And it's really important. Obviously, no parent wants to flip their lid with their kids, none of us.
But every parent does.
But all of us do. And on top of that, with our kids, we lose, you know, we're working so hard to build trust with them and felt safety that when we do that, it's a lot harder to repair than with kids who don't have the trauma history that many of our kids have. So, so that's why I can't emphasize enough. If you need to take a break, sometimes the best response is not responding in that moment.
Yeah, waiting.
As long as everyone's safe, right? Obviously, if there's a safety concern or something like that. So like in this, it was a pillow fight that got really loud when we had asked them to be quiet, you know, that no one's being injured.
So what did you do in the meantime then, if you need to take that pause, but like Amanda was still on had to wrap up her work stuff. So how do you take a pause, and do you just let the chaos still go? And you're like, how does that work, David? You need to tap out, but the other person isn't quite ready to tap in.
I
And
see
then
it as the perpetrators. And they weren't, time out far, far away, but they were.
Like, you sit on this couch, you sit on this couch, and
when I'm ready or your mom's ready, we'll talk to you.
Yeah.
And it was only, I think everybody knows their kids. They're all different. For our kids and their ages and their stories, their trauma, their background, it was 10, 15 minutes, and that was appropriate.
And one of them was reading and the other was playing with animals, so, but it was, and I knew, like, at that point, like, when you get to a level 3 in your family, right? Like, everyone knows you're at a level 3, and they know, like, if I do something else, this is going to get bad. So they responded, right? Like, there's a lot of trust there. There's a lot of history there. And they knew when David said, like, you sit here, do not speak, your mom, or I will be in shortly. They knew. So, and yes, we have times when they don't know and it goes poorly too.
Yeah. So it sounds like in that instance, they were able to gain some self-regulation while they waited for you.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And we've had times where kids, depending on where they were, they couldn't.
Well, and remember, this wasn't about them, right?
Yeah.
Like, kids playing a pillow fight, like, this was about our buttons and our stuff. So this wasn't an instance where they were out of control because they were in fear and they needed us to regulate them, right? This is about them pushing our buttons. And it had to do with us and our needs. It didn't have to, they were being normal kids. There was
good clarification.
Yeah. So they weren't in need of self-regulation skills in that moment because they were just playing. They weren't mad at each other. They were having a pillow fight as in a fun pillow fight, not a we're mad at each other pillow fight. So in that instance, that worked. So it was like, your mom will be up shortly. But then there's also instances where you need to have the baton removed from you. And what we mean here is, when you, rather than recognizing, and we talk about being mindful in our parenting with TBRI, we just all need to admit that there are times when we're not. And we engage in what ends up becoming a power struggle, or it becomes about us, right? And we're not able to disengage when we should. And so there are those moments too. And so our advice that's worked for us is really two things in, I call it removing the baton. So when I'm removing David's baton or he is removing mine, like, there's kind of two rules. The first is you have to agree upon this and talk about it before, right? Like, this is a discussion that maybe you have after this call that you initiate of, hey, when this is happening, when I recognize that this is happening, do I have permission to step in? And if I do, how would you like me to do that in a way that feels respectful to you? So for me, David can just say, Amanda, you need to go, and my feelings aren't hurt. And I'm like, thank God I'm out of here. Like, that's fine. I will take anyone taking the baton at any moment, which is why I'm so sad that I have no teachers to pass the baton off to right now. But with David, that's like a more sensitive. And so we have a way of doing that where I say, like, hey, I need your help in the kitchen. And that's like our like phrase that, like, that could mean fixing the sink or getting yourself a drink or right, whatever that it means to him in that moment. But he knows, like, that's our code for, I'm now going to step in and do this because you have now flipped your lid.
Yep.
Yeah. I love that. I love having the idea of having some kind of pre-set up code so that, and I like what you're saying, so that the other person doesn't feel disrespected. Like, if you set it up ahead of time, then it's code, and it is in code. I mean, kids might catch on one day, but
yeah,
you're not also in front of the kids saying, like, you are out of control. Yeah. You need to get out, then you're not being disrespectful to your spouse either. You're
right.
Yeah. Well, the other day she said to me, "Do you think you should go take a walk?" Probably guess why.
Right.
Which we're probably all saying to each other a lot in these days, right?
Yeah.
And like the more, remember, like the more grace you give, the more grace you get. And that is just a theme of mine. And so, you know, figuring that out though, because what does that look like? Because there's a lot of dynamics. If, let's say, you're co-parenting with your mom, or you know, maybe it's a teen mom that you're teaching to parent her child in your home, right? Like, so those codes are going to be different depending on what that relationship dynamic is. So again, having the conversation in advance, I think makes it okay. And it also kind of triggers, in TBRI, we talk about, you know, making those neural connections and creating those pathways in the brain. In calm times, if we've had those discussions, we've already made a neural pathway for that. So even if David has flipped his lid and I say, I need your help in the kitchen right now, like there's already a neural pathway that says to him, I have to disengage now. And there are times when for either of us that, I mean, when once you've engaged in a power struggle, we all know, if we're being honest, it's hard to disengage. But to, again, like create those neural pathways and practice that, and talk about it after. If it didn't go well, talk about it, because again, that goes back through those neural pathways and helps so that that response becomes quicker. So that was the thing about passing it versus kind of having it taken from you. And then whether you've passed the baton or it's been taken from you, what do you do in that time? And so that's kind of like, we wanted to talk about, like, what do you do to replenish during that time? Do you want to talk about that or no?
Well, I can just, for a few minutes and then you can chime in. But for me, that's hard. Like one of my weakest areas spiritually is probably self-care. So, and I know a lot of men, it seems to be that way. So, especially all being quarantined together, the things I was doing to replenish and take care of myself, boy, did that list get shrunk down, truncated, deleted, whatever happened to it, I'm not sure. So for me, I have to, in that instance, which was yesterday or the day before, I had to find ways to recharge my batteries. And I know I need to do things to take care of my body. And so, you know, normally I go to a gym. Guess what? It's closed. So whether it's walking or running outside, or I don't have that much time because 5 kids are on electronic devices trying to do Zoom calls with their class. But, oh, by the way, now we can't use Zoom. Now we have to use Google because Zoom is not secure, and all of that's happening. So maybe I need to go to the garage and do 10 push-ups, which I've done. So I have to take care of my body, and that also helps me mentally. And I need to take care of my spirit. So, you know, my verse for this quarantine is Philippians 4, that rejoice in the Lord always. And for me, I have to stop and I have to find things to be grateful for. And for me, my mind, body, spirit, I think it's all of us. It's all intimately connected. So if I take care of one area of my soul, it helps the other area. So I find things I'm grateful for. I am really frustrated with my kids right now, but I have an opportunity. They'll never forget this, whether we like it or not. Right. So I get the opportunity to build deeper connections with each of them, that there is no way, if this didn't happen, that we'd have this much time. I mean, the very thing we wish we didn't have right now. I'm grateful for it. So I find things to be grateful, Philippians 4. And then it says, let your gentleness be known to all men. I find ways to be gentle. And I think when Paul says that, he's talking about us finding ways when we don't want to be gentle. And then let your requests be known to God. So that's, you know, when I take care of myself, whether I'm running and praying or reading my Bible or whatever those things are that are renewing to each of us when you're doing them, I talk to God about those things. You know, 1 Peter 5:7, cast all your cares on him. And the thing I shared with Amanda yesterday, that word cast is an intentional act that moves an object. And so that really helps me, because I get gray in my prayers and I just start nebulously praying, or I get apathetic. because I'm just overwhelmed, and God knows my situation. My situation is no different to anybody else. So who am I to ask exact requests? But it's exactly what God asks us to do. And when it says cast our cares on him, we're supposed to intentionally move our anxiety to him, 1 Peter 5:7, through prayer. So anyway, so that's just some of the stuff I do. And then the end of that, Philippians 4:8, it says, then the peace that passes all understanding will guard your heart. It's the result of doing those things. And I know that. I used to be a pastor, for crying out loud, but I forget. And when all this stuff is happening, I don't take care of me, and then I flip my lid a lot sooner. So that, for me, that's been a huge part of taking care of me so that I can take care of my family.
Yeah, and I think for each of us, that looks different. But when you do tag out, we need to be intentional with that time, because the purpose of that time is to get you back regulated so that then you can go close the loop with those kids or kid. And so what does that look like for you?
One more thing we did with our best friends, we did a double date the other night. On Zoom. On Zoom, don't worry. Chat room's blowing up now. And that was awesome for us. It was, and we prayed with each other. And I know you guys at Saddleback do such a great job. And I know it's harder for some than others to reach out. And you have to be creative, and it looks different, especially if you're a extrovert like me. But you got to find those ways. And that was renewing to me. That really helped.
Yeah.
What did your double date look like? What does that look like on Zoom?
So we were like this, and then they were like that. And then
you just talked?
Yeah, and we just talked like, what's going well for you guys? What's been tricky? How can we pray for you?
Yeah.
Tell us the best thing you've done this week. So that was really good.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I saw in here, like, how do you pass the baton when no one's ready to take it? And one of the things I would say to that is we kind of had, which FYI, like usually one of us is always single parenting. And so we've, one of the things we're grateful for right now is that we get to pass the baton. And I think maybe that's why this time has been kind of cool for us, is because when he's not traveling, I usually am. And so it's been like this real luxury to have this. So we get the idea, like, well, if there's no one to pass it to, or no one's available at the moment, or whatever, then like when we tag out, what does that look like? And so for our kids in their developmental ages, that might look like for us right now, our kids each get an hour of electronics time a day, safe devices and all those things. So that might be when we tag out, is okay, it's, especially like if he were gone, like Friday, he leaves for 2 days. So, I'm going to time that, that their electronic time is at a certain, because I'm going to know I'm going to need that break. So it can look like that. When they were little, I had a bin of toys, and I wasn't, unfortunately, tagging out at the time to go like take a nap, but we had a kiddo who would really spiral and go to like a level 4 quite often. And so when that would happen, then I would pull out the bin for everybody else to occupy themselves while I was one-on-one with this kiddo. And so what that looked like for them was, in that bin was toys that they never got at any other point, because they were little. And so that was really powerful at that time. So depending on your kids' ages and their developmental levels, if you need to take a break and there's no one to tag in, you need to have, age appropriate activities or things like that. Guys, if you need to use a show and let your kids watch TV for a couple hours right now, do it.
Yeah.
Because that is less damaging than you being a grump and pushing them away emotionally, or with our words or our unkind actions or things, because we're all human and we all do that normally, let alone when there's a pandemic. So, figure out, what does that look like? If I can't do it anymore right now, what Netflix show can I just press play on?
Yeah, and on that, with multiple kids, we don't ever want another, it happens because that's part of being any family, we know that, but we don't want to intentionally, or I shouldn't say intentionally, but accidentally, intentionally, you'll see what I mean in a minute, but punish a kid for another kid's behavior. Meaning Amanda needs to focus one-on-one with this kid because dad's gone, and there's 4 other kids. So maybe they do have to do some extra electronic time, or they get that toy bin or whatever, so that it still happens. That's my point. But so that their world doesn't stop and they go without, because you need to deal with one situation or you need to take care of yourself.
So then the idea is, right, like we've replenished whatever that looks like for each of us. And then we come back and we close the loop. And what Karen used to say for this is you need to finish business with who you started business with. So if, Layla rolls her eyes at me and I, lose it, and David takes the baton and he helps her get the trash out and gets her calmed down because I've revved her up. When I'm calm, I need to come back into the situation and finish business with Layla. And the reason that is so important, there's actually a couple reasons, but the first reason is that curtails triangulation. Because what happens if a kid pushes our button and then they know when I do this, I then get to deal with dad instead of mom, or vice versa, right? Or when I do this to dad or grandma, then I get to deal with mom, whatever that looks like. Then that suddenly gives them, right, the ability and the power to triangulate and to, cause division amongst us, but also for a lot of our kids who have attachment disruptions and, a lot of attachment history, that is more comfortable for them, right? So if they have some issues attachment-wise with me, and they know if I roll my eyes, I don't have to deal with her, I get to deal with him, then they're going to do that every time it gets hard in our relationship. And then I'm not helping them heal that attachment wound. So it's really important that when we tag out, that we tag back in at some point. And that can be sometimes, and I'm only speaking from experience here, sometimes if everything's going great and the train is moving again and everyone's happy, and then you come back in, you're like, oh, it's easier, it's better if I don't bring it up or if we don't talk about this because everyone's doing fine. But that's not the case. It's really important that we finish that loop for the kids. And so what that, might look like for me with the Layla situation is, maybe it's 15 minutes later, I come back in and I say, hey, Layla, I'm really sorry that I flipped my lid. I shouldn't have done that, right? So first I'm going to apologize and own up to my mistake. No ifs, ands, or buts. I'm not going to say, but you rolled your eyes and you know how disrespectful that is. Or, and you rolled your eyes and that's not okay, right? It's just purely owning the way we want our kids to apologize to us. So I'm really sorry that I did this and I shouldn't have done that. End of story. And that's that repair there. Almost always, because I have a relationship, right? This isn't a foster kid who just moved in. She already knows that she rolled her eyes and I think that's disrespectful, right? She knows.
It's not new news.
Right.
She's very aware of that. So most often in that moment right there, she's like, I'm really sorry I rolled my eyes. And then we move on. So really when we talk about TBRI and the levels, and I see some questions about levels, just to give kind of a brief example, a level 1 is kind of where we live at. And you can think of this like as a ladder. So level 1 is playful engagement. That's where hopefully our homes are always existing in. We're engaging with our kids, we're having fun, the train is moving. And a level 2 is, maybe a kid runs by and says like, I'm going outside, and we stop them, right? And we say, are you asking or telling, right? And so it's a little more directed, it's playful, but are you asking or telling? And if a kid says, I'm telling you, I'm going outside, we're now at a level 2, right? Where they need some direct help. And so then we say, remember, you're not allowed to tell me what you're doing. You may ask me. So would you like to ask again with respect if you can go outside? Or would you like to play inside right now and try again later? Right? And so we're going to give choices and give a more direct response. A level 3 would be if then they opened the door and went outside. Right? So now we've tried to structure it up and that didn't work. And so now we're at a level 3. And so, and then at a level 3 is then when we're just trying to help them and usually us stay calm, right? And if our kids have already lost it, it looks like, how can I help them to calm down? They might be running outside. This happened the other day, right? They're running outside to go jump on the trampoline or swim or whatever in the backyard because they just lost it upstairs with the sibling and they're trying really hard to regulate, right? And so by me just adding that extra oomph, it just sent them over the edge. So then I go out there after a couple minutes and I say, what's going on? And then suddenly I get this whole story, right? And I came out here to jump on the trampoline so I wouldn't punch him in the face, right? I get it, bud. Let's try it again now. But now he's jumped for 5 minutes, so it's a different story. And so I've watched him do this, or I've helped him do this. Our kids have the skills now to do it on their own, but we've been working with them for 9 years, 10 years on this, right? So it looks a little different. But, you know, and then after level 3, then we're going right back down to a level 2. So would you like to go try it again now, or would you like 2 more minutes of jumping on the trampoline? Right? Then they try it again, they do the redo, and then we're right back at a level 1. Good job, buddy. All right, go enjoy your afternoon. Level 4 is like when people are getting hurt and we have to stop the violence. And so, but then once again, once we stop the violence, it's level 3, level 2, level 1. And so when we talk about handing off, you know, the baton or passing the buck, it's someone stepping into that ladder for us and finishing the loop and getting them back down to a level 1. But it's our job to then come back in when we're at a level 1 and they're at a level 1 and reconnect. Because remember, the foundation of TBRI is attachment and connection. And so without us closing that loop and coming back around and finishing business, our kids don't know if relationally we're okay. And so we have to make sure that we do that.
Yeah,
I
I can't.
appreciate, oh, go ahead, David.
No, I'm just going to comment really quickly. I think that I can't bring a kid back down to a level unless I am really genuinely there myself. And I need to be at that level I aspire for them to come down to with them in my relationship with them. Obviously, I need to have that connection to do it. But so, and that goes into the self-care piece. That's it.
Yeah. I appreciate, yeah, and you can't fake it. They know when you're faking it. I appreciate you just bringing up that we need to finish our business with the kids, because I know for a season there when things were really hard, I wouldn't finish the business. You know, it was just too hard. And so he would come home and I'd tag out, but I never would tag back in. And then we realized, like, oh, this is causing problems. So I started tagging back in, but then I would have him there. And so we would tag me back in, but together. And so that he was the backup for me so that we were a united front. And that really helped, I think, me be able to just have my own voice and be able to tag back in, because I think sometimes that can be really hard if you know, our kids are just really abusive and we haven't gotten to a place where you know, we can do that and they can do that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much of this can get I mean, relationships are messy, like, period. But, you know, when we add in kids from trauma and then a marriage or a parenting relationship or whatever that might look like, friendship relationship, I can't tell, and I know every time I talk, I say this, but I can't tell people enough, like, you have to go to therapy if you do this. Like, you have to be going to a therapist. We go to a therapist all the time, specifically for what you're talking about. Like, what does it look like when my stuff is rubbing up against our kids' stuff, against your stuff, right? Like, how do we manage that in a way that's honoring to God, honoring to each other, and helpful to our kids, right? And so, like, when you're talking about, like, tagging in and tagging out and what that dynamic looks like on the regular basis, that has everything to do with each of our own stuff, right? And so talking that through with a third party who is good at doing that with you is, I can't tell you, is so important, because this is really hard stuff. What we're doing, and I know I don't need to remind any of you of that, but what we're doing is really hard. And so you need someone who can help you see it, that isn't in it. Because even your spouse might have great insight for you, but they're still in it. And so you need someone who is completely neutral about it, who can really help everyone see, you know, what does that look like?
And I think for us, we need both the therapy, you know, whether you call it marriage counseling or go one-on-one. We've done all shades of that, but also we need our friends, our safe people. And for us, like, you know, we were thinking about an incident with one of our hardest kids when I was out of town, and one of our safe people came and took one of the kids to her house because it was level 4, and I was gone, and she was done. So we have different people that are safe to help in those kind of situations with our kids, and those aren't necessarily the same friends we call to be our free therapists.
Right.
Just, and we say, you're our close friends, therefore we're not paying you to help us. So
Yeah,
you know,
no, that's so true.
it takes a village.
And I saw even like some questions of like, what do you do when it's at a level 4? And obviously there's a million responses for that. But one of the things that we've done is call someone in who's not us.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes if we're really, well, I will only speak for myself. When we've gotten to a level 4 in our home, oftentimes I'm the reason we're there, is I didn't tag out when I should have. And so honestly, sometimes, and there are obviously situations where you can't wait 20 minutes for someone to get there.
Sure.
But you know, in those situations, I've locked myself in my room because I wasn't the safe one, and said like, get here and come pick him up and take him to your house until I call you back. And I have people in our lives specifically for that reason, who love, you know, this specific kiddo, and who, you know, are just like, anytime you need, you know, us to spend time with him, let us know. And we really do have 3 of those people who at a moment's notice I could call, and they would come pick him up, no questions asked. And just because he needs a break from me, guys. Like, it's not like, I don't necessarily, it's not because of him. Like, sometimes it's me, because his stuff rubs up against my stuff different. And so it's been really healing for us. But obviously there are safe ways within your state as well. Yeah.
And on that note, in our current quarantine world, I've even thought, ironically, that kid in our environment in the quarantine thing is doing really well. We're both kind of talking about it and shocked at how well he's doing. And I think that speaks to our connection with him, and he feels safe. The anxiety he normally has with going to school is removed. So I'm just grateful. There you go, on my list. Thankful. But
and it's also that we can tag out, right? So I'm not getting exhausted
Yeah.
with that relationship because we're doing it together, and usually we're not. So.
And I'm here instead of being gone, so that makes a difference. So he feels safer, maybe. But on that note, I even thought one of those close friends that has taken him out for ice cream when he's doing well to build that relationship, and is on the emergency call list if he goes to level 4 or whatever. I even, you know, we were talking about Zoom double dates, and I was going to have him Zoom with him, and let them have a little one-on-one in the other room. And that's a way that her and I could take a break, talk about the situation, or just go take care of ourselves, whatever we need to do.
Yeah, I love that. That's like a proactive way that we can make sure that relationship, even during this quarantine, is still happening and connecting with those people that our kids used to be able to go to. Where if you do that Zoom call during a good time, then when it does get bad, that connection's still there.
Yeah, and on that note, I know everybody's different, and there's all these technology challenges, but if you know, our kids are having Zoom or Google classes and they're getting to see their classmates, And it's funny, it's fun for me watching his face light up when he's like bantering with his classmates. And whether that's happening or not, if there's a way for you to do that with your kids and schedule those virtual play dates or whatever, obviously you can supervise it. And that may be a creative way that you can have a little bit of time and set it up with safe boundaries so that you can have a break and they can get their social needs met. It's not ideal, but it's something.
Yeah, I know we just played, sorry, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just one of the gestures you guys have been making, I think it's the whole brain child.
Yeah.
The lid. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you did this a couple of times. When this happens, and people are probably going, when this happens, is that like?
It's like a middle
No,
thing.
the middle finger means, but what is this?
You want to explain it?
Yeah, we're talking about like the hand model of the brain from Daniel Siegel, and he talks about flipping your lid, which is like when your amygdala is, taking control and you're in fight, flight, or freeze, which is really when we're at a level 3 or 4. So like when we connect those to the levels, at a level 3, most likely your child has either already flipped their lid, right? So they're just in fight, flight, or freeze, or their downstairs brain. They're not able to talk about why, how come, feeling dissociated, the story, right? None of those things. It's just, we don't understand what's going on. Or we're there. And so that's at a level 3 and 4. So a level 4, we often associate with kind of the fight, right? Where they're throwing chairs or trying to hurt themselves or other people, right? So that's that fight. But really there's a freeze response too, which often gets overlooked. And then a flight, right? They're running away, or flight response can also be just where they're talking nonstop, things like that. And then there's also now a 4th feign. But all of that to understand basically when either you or your child are in your downstairs brain, you've flipped your lid, connection can't happen, learning cannot happen. This is not when we teach them, hey, you're at a level 3 and to calm down, you need to do 3 deep breaths, and right, none of that works.
Yeah, and if you're of any doubt, any husband that's ever, when their wife has flipped their lid, said, you just need to calm down, let me know how that's worked.
Right. It doesn't work.
No.
So yeah, that's what we mean by that. And it's The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Daniel Siegel. And he also goes into it a little bit in No Drama Discipline. And that's another really great book. And if you are not a reader, or your spouse is not a reader, they also have like kind of like the refrigerator section where like it's just like bullet points, like really quick ideas from both of those books about, understanding our kids' brains and how we can respond to them.
Nice. Wonderful. Well, our time's already flown by. It just goes by so quick. I share that one thing we did to keep our kids still engaged with like our grandparents, my parents, is we played dice, like a dice game. It was kind of like a Yahtzee game. And we had our set, they had their set, and we did it through FaceTime actually. And it worked out pretty good. It was good enough, good enough for the social aspect.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you guys, I have 3 questions for you that I like to kind of end with. And the first one is, what brings you joy?
There's several things that bring me joy. The one that I'm noticing more than life. And I am so grateful for the relationship we have, as a couple and with our kids. And this quarantine has shown me, everything we're talking about, because we've been, at every place with all these kids. But I just, one thing that brings me joy is that we can see the fruit of all that work. It's working. It's not ideal. It's not perfect, but that brings me joy. Tell you it.
Mine is much less deep. We are quarantined in Hawaii because my husband is a pilot and the people he flies are here and they want their pilot here. So they have made us all stay in Hawaii. And so that brings me joy that I am not in snowy Colorado. and that I can at least, if nothing else, go for a walk in a t-shirt and flip-flops.
Nice. I love it. That's a nice perk.
It is.
So the second question is, if you could say one thing to your younger self when you first started this adoption journey, what would it be?
I know right away.
Go ahead.
Okay. Mine would be, this is all about you, and it's not about the kids. I think I think all of us in some way go in thinking, we're going to help kids, and, we have so much to offer and things like that. But I did not realize the amount of work it would be for me and my own personal work with Jesus and myself and our marriage. I had no clue how much I had to do. And if I could do it over, I would have worked a lot harder beforehand on those things and less on all the other things I was trying to focus on. I would have focused more on myself and, the work I needed to do.
Yeah, mine's the same. It's that this is going to be the most difficult thing you do in your entire life. It'll challenge you on every level. You'll grow more through this process than anything else throughout your life in every way, spiritually, emotionally, physically. Maybe you just eat your feelings. That's a joke. But also that it would be the most rewarding.
Yeah.
Oh, great answers. I could have a conversation about that. What foster adoption myth would you like to just dispel, like just blow up right now?
There's several.
Where to start? I think mine would be I think that we're all really cool. I think that there's so much out there about foster parents and how weird we are. And we're weird, but we're cool weird. I've literally never met a foster or adopted parent that I didn't want to hang out with more. That's, I think, one reason why I love my job is that I get to connect with so many amazing people. And so I just love the community that is us. And I know that there's a lot of stuff around our community that isn't awesome, but I think there's also some just really, really beautiful things about our community. And that being people of faith, I feel like we are some of the realest people of faith there are, because you can't lie to yourself about Jesus when you're fostering kids, because all of it is right up in your face. And so any box that you had about God and what you thought he fit in gets blown up. And so as people of faith, I just find us to be really deep and insightful people.
Yeah, mine, I can think of so many, but mine is more on just because of where I'm at in this quarantine season. but mine is, because I've been there, the myth would be that it's hopeless, that your kids are stuck or that you cannot do this, whatever those myths or lies are, because God will give you everything you need.
That's good, babe.
I know. Thanks, David. I bet you there's some people on this call that really need to hear that,
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Well, that's kind of all we have tonight for our conversation. I'm going to make a few announcements. We have, you guys actually, we have a TCU web link that Max put up. I think it's somewhere in the beginning of the chat. If not, he can put it up. And we follow up everybody who registers with an email. So we'll send that link out too. But I noticed Texas Christian University at the Karen Purvis Institute is having a free sale. It's not even a sale. It's just a free TBRI courses through the end of May 31st. So if you'd like to know more about TBRI, what it is that Amanda is teaching all about, and all these levels and what all that means, go ahead and click on, take advantage of this free course because it's not always free. And then also Saddleback Church, our church, is having a free 2-day course. We are both practitioners, and there's some other practitioners at our church, and the website for that will be up to the link for that. And then I just wanted to say our upcoming guests, next week we're going to have Derek Hamer, and when you register for that, There'll be a spot where you can ask 2 questions, one from a parent wanting to know from an adoptee, and then one I would like my son Jonathan is going to co-host with me. At least that's the plan. We'll see. And so he's going to read the questions from the kids. So if you have a question from your kid, or even if your kid may not ask that, maybe you can think of a question that you would think they would want to know. So that's on the registration for next week's Replenish. And then after that, the following week, we'll have Katie Edwards, and she's a junior high pastor. She's going to be talking to us about screen time during the quarantine and all of this and what that looks like for our kids. She's also a foster adopt mom. And then after that, we have Deborah Gray, who is a licensed social worker, and she specializes in attachment, grief, and trauma issues. So then stick around for the after party. We're going to wave goodbye and say goodbye to Amanda and David. And if you want to stick around for a half hour with me and my husband and, I don't know, party it up, drink tea on a Zoom call, you're welcome to. Yes. Yeah. We don't even get bubbly.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. This was an honor and it was fun for us. Yep. So thank you guys. And
thank you. Thanks for extending your kids' electronic time for us.
They're so happy that you guys asked us to do that.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.